Hello, I'm Joshua Gordon. We are live with Sports Conflict Institute's SCI TV. Welcome, and I am joined today by a very special guest, Alex Smolka, coach of Florida Atlantic University. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So, Alex, I imagine you're in the summer here, so hopefully you're in air conditioning as we have this conversation.
Yes, I'm sitting in a fairly cool office of mine, yes.
So let's talk about some interesting topics today. I want to dig right in about really what we're trying to wrestle with on our topic today is some of the balancing act that you have for athletes in trying to be high performers and still have some semblance of balance as a student athlete and all of that. And I guess a starting question would be, when you're thinking about the culture you want as a coach for your athletes and for your team, how would you describe that culture that you're trying to instill upon your team?
I think, at our level, I still look at it as academics first, athletics second, but the culture really is one of striving to be the best you possibly can be to maximize your potential academically and athletically.
That sounds great. And when you think about, what are some of those challenges that you're wrestling with as you think about supporting them and trying to have academics first but still be high performers? What are some of those challenges that you find you deal with most often?
I think the biggest challenge is, college life or expectations that people have coming to college and how much fun they're going to have. It's the whole idea of what a good social life is and versus what a healthy social life can be. I think that the biggest issue is having people transition from high school to college in a responsible way without going down the wrong path.
And so when people first come to campus, are there certain things you find yourself doing each year to help with that transition from high school to college?
Yes, there's a bunch of meetings we go through. It's a lot of I try not to lecture too much, but it's a bunch of discussions about responsibility, about social media, about what they can and can't do, what they should and shouldn't do, and then ultimately what it comes down to making the right choices, or making choices that really they know what choices they're making, and then living with the consequences of those choices.
And is that primarily the responsibility of the coaching staff, or do you have other supports or maybe other student leaders that you lean on for this?
I would say it's primarily the coaching staff. Once the semester gets going, the first couple of days, we have mandatory meetings. First as a team, where we do a bunch of the NCAA paperwork, and then during that session, we also have somebody from sports information come in and talk to the student athletes. And then the first night of the semester, we have a all sports meeting with the entire student athlete population, and then the president speaks for a little bit, and then the athletic director speaks for a little bit. But those meetings, hopefully, out of an hour and a half, out of a 90-minute meeting, hopefully they take a few bits and pieces out of it. I think the bulk of what we are trying to convey to them takes place in the smaller meetings that we have as a team during the semester. These sort of like ongoing meetings that we have during the semester.
Fantastic. And now track and field and cross country are tough sports. Right? These are not easy sports. They're not the kind of sports that you can just kind of half-heartedly get your way through it. Baseball, which I also played in addition to running growing up, I could be subpar physically and still perform at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
Track and field, cross country, a whole different game. How are you helping people deal with that kind of balancing act where the demands on them physically are so substantial, and yet there are so many other things going on in their life socially and educationally that can draw away from that?
I try to have individual meetings with our student athletes at least once every 2 weeks, and then we have team meetings on Fridays. Friday is normally an easy day. We normally do a little bit less mileage. We do a little bit of a pool workout, and then we spend about 45 minutes in a classroom to talk about various topics, anything from nutrition to sports psychology. But one of the topics always is again, making the right choices and realizing that, if you choose, it's the individual's choice to be on that team, but if they choose to be on that team, then they have to understand that if they choose to stay up until 2 a.m. And we have practice at 6:30 in the morning, it's they're going to suffer, and if it keeps on going, eventually your immune system is going to be compromised. Academically, you're not going to perform as well. So I try and sort of like very rationally and sensibly try to explain to them that there comes a point where if you choose that your social life is more important than running, and maybe being on the team is not the best idea for you. But if you want to improve, if you want to do well, then you're going to have to make sometimes tough choices in order to maximize how good you can be, and that goes for academics just as well. We have a mandatory 8 hours of study hall per week, which 4 of those are basically very regimented, where they have to meet with an academic advisor 1 hour a week. They have to have individual tutoring sessions a couple of hours a week. They have what's called supplemental instructional sessions with professors across campus. And then we have about 4 hours of sort of like free elective study hall hours, where they just have to go into a study hall lab, sign in, get the hours done, and sign out. And what we do is, if somebody doesn't make the hours any given week, we get emails about that, and then there's some consequences that take place if you don't make the hours. And again, it goes back to making choices and taking responsibility for your actions. And that's sort of how I try, again, in a very very matter of fact way, without talking about punishment, without talking about any threats. It's basically the choice that the student athlete has to make. I can't make the choice for them if they want to get up in the morning and come to practice. So I can't make the choice for them if they want to study for the upcoming biology exam. It's their choice, but whatever choice they make, they have to live with the consequences of those choices. So
it sounds like for you, you've had a pretty good run at trying to set really clear expectations and then having some ways to measure whether or not they're leading up to it.
Yes, I think through trial and error, we've tried to we've gone through a bunch of different ideas, and we've tried to come up with something that I don't want to come across as a super authoritarian. I want to come across as somebody who's here to guide them and help them through those 4 years, and hopefully make them better students, better athletes, and better people at the end of it.
Now, what about injuries? So we know in sports in general that there is a culture where many of us are taught to perform injured, to stay tough, to do our best even if we're not physically there. How much of that is a balancing act for you as a coach in trying to either hold people back when they're trying to fight through an injury, or the opposite, trying to encourage folks to come to the line and compete when they're not at their best?
I think it's getting to know the individual athlete, and because everybody, you can be sore, you can be injured, you can have aches and pains, and it's a question of knowing what somebody's pain threshold is, knowing a little bit about the severity of the possible injury and what the consequences can be. And I think we do a fairly good job in our individual meetings trying to get to know the athletes, and by in the end, quite honestly, I prefer to probably be a little bit more conservative than too aggressive, just because of the potential nowadays, the potential of serious injury and the potential of other consequences. I prefer to be a little bit more conservative than otherwise. But I think you have to take it athlete by athlete, because not everybody reacts the same to even the same possible injury.
And what about, there are things that happen in life for any student athlete. What are the acceptable reasons for missing a meet, and what are the unacceptable reasons from your perspective?
I think what we talk about a lot is I want them to look at their responsibility to the team very similar as taking another class. So if it's whether it's a biology class or a chemistry class, if our practices or our competitions are basically like, midterms or finals. So, if you were to miss, what reasons would you have to miss a midterm and final? Hopefully, if there's some sort of, God forbid, family emergency, if there's, some serious illness where it wouldn't benefit the team, it wouldn't benefit us, it wouldn't benefit them to compete, or if there's some, if there is some injury that, where the athletic trainers actually say, having them race would actually cause them more harm in the long run, so it might be a better idea not to have them race. We do have a lot of input from the athletic trainers, and ultimately they actually have the last call whether somebody is permitted to compete or not. So in certain situations it's taken out of our hands, and the athletic trainers make the final call.
Yeah, it makes good sense. And as we wrap our conversation here, any final thoughts on this subject matter of striking a balance for student athletes, and your advice to either other coaches or student athletes as they contemplate these issues?
I think the lifestyle of a student athlete can be an amazing experience, and it can be the best 4 years of the best 4 years of your life if it's done in the right way. I think the balance, in order to succeed, in my mind, has to be academics first, athletics second, social life third. And if it's done in that order, you can have a very, very successful college career, maybe even beyond college for a few years, and then take those skills that you learned into the workplace and have a very successful life.
Very sound advice. And as folks want to learn more about your program or your coaching, what are ways they can follow you on the internet, Twitter, or elsewhere?
We have a team Twitter account, which is FAU cross country _track. I have my own Twitter account, which is at Alex Smolka, and then our webpage is fausports.com. And I gladly welcome as many viewers or as many followers as I possibly can have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your input and expertise. We wish you luck in the months ahead.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.